Hi boys and girls, it's Miss Atkinson. Today I'm going to try something a little different. We're going to talk about, oops, that fell. We're going to discuss 6.2D, ordering rational numbers. So I want you to go to your table of contents and I want you to put this in your table of contents. Today's date is September 25th, 2020. And we're going to answer the question, how to order rational numbers. And remember, rational numbers are fractions and decimals that can be negative or positive. We're going to use some prior knowledge that we learned from our last unit to be able to complete step 1. Step 1 says we have to change all of our numbers to the same form. So what does that mean? That means that when we're comparing them, they have to look alike. So we learned last unit that we can make equivalent decimals, fractions, and percents. So those are one of the forms that you're going to choose to change them all to. Okay? Think about how you're going to change them. A decimal, you can use Dr. Pepper to change percents. You can rewrite a fraction with the denominator of a 10 or 100 and rewrite it using place value. A fraction, that's the most challenging because you have to think about common denominators. How do I make my number on bottom be the same? So that takes a little bit more work. Or can I change them to percents? And if it's a decimal, you can change it by just using the Dr. Pepper method. Step 2 says we're going to separate the negatives from the positives. And the way that I like to do that is by using a T-chart. And we just put negatives on one side and positives on the other. And then step 3 is you're just going to order them. And a lot of times if you use a number line, that's what's going to help you because you can visually see the order that you're writing your numbers on. So what I want you to think about is to the left are positive numbers and to the right are negative numbers. And when we're talking about these numbers, you already have some idea of how to compare them. The easiest for you to compare is 1, 2, 3, because these are positive and they are growing from least to greatest. However, when we talk about negative numbers, it's a little bit more challenging because you are used to thinking, when we write these backwards, it's -1, -2, -3, that 3 is greater than 1. However, when we're talking about negative numbers, remember, the further away from 0 it is, the smaller it's getting. That order still applies. It is still least to greatest from left to right. So -3 is less than -1. This is what we're going to have to really pay attention to when we're looking at negative numbers. So if you use a number line to help order them, I promise you, you will be more successful. Okay? So if you need to stop the video, put this in your journal, go ahead and do that at this time. All right? I'm going to go ahead and keep going. So over here on my right, I have the problems that we're going to put in our journal today. So go ahead and go to the next page. And you're going to have 4 examples, okay? So the first example, you have these set of numbers. But before you do anything, I want you to write a shorthand set of notes. That way you can go back to it every time. Step 1, S1, that stands for step 1. You're going to change the form. They have to be the same form. So this is your reminder. Step 2, you're going to separate negatives and positives. Okay? Your negatives on the left, your positives on the right. And then step 3, you're going to order. And remember, if you use a number line, it's always going to be beneficial. Okay? So these are my numbers right here. So I have 3/4, I have 7/10, 50%, and 1 2/10. You get to decide what order. So I'm going to walk you through this example. And remember, at the end of this, you can pause the video and put this in your in your journal. This is example 1. So let's say I have 3/4 here. Do I want to turn these turn these into fractions, 7/10, 50%, and 1 2/10? I don't know. Let's think about it. I know that this is 7/10. Wait a minute. That's 4 and 10. I cannot make that 4 a 10 very easily. I can go 4 times 2 is 8, but it's never going to be 10. I don't think I want to change it to a fraction. So what else is on our list? Percent. Let's try percent. 3/4 is a benchmark percent. I know that is 75%. It's a benchmark. This number is actually 0.075. When I move my decimal 2 places, using Dr. Pepper, I get 75%. I'm going to do the same thing with 7/10. I'm going to move that decimal 2 places and add a 0. That becomes 70%. 50% is already in the percent form. And then I have 1 2/10. I'm going to find my decimal, go 1, 2, add a 0. That's 120%. Step 2 says look at negatives and positives. These are all positive, so I don't need to worry about a T-chart. Step 3 says order them. Well, I'm going to use my number line. I'm going to start at 0 because there's nothing less than 0. So which percent is the smallest? Well, 50%, 70%, 75%, and 120%. That is the correct order. It is in ascending order. So if I wanted ascending order, which means least to greatest, I already have it on the number line. Least to greatest. See the benefits of using a number line? When you are rewriting this, what I would like for you to do is change it back to its original form. So 50% is okay. 50%, and we're going to use the inequality sign. 50% is less than 70%. 70% was actually 7/10. 7/10 is less than 75%, which the original form was 3/4. And 3/4 is less than 120%, which was 1 2/10. So this is my order from least to greatest in ascending order. Example 1 is complete. Go ahead and pause the video and make sure you have everything written down. All right? We're going to look at example 2. My numbers for example 2 are 85/100, 3/5, 15/100, and 7/10. Okay? So we're going to follow the same steps. They never change. I'm going to write them in the same form. So I don't have any percents. So let's try something different. Again, do I want to write these in fraction form? I have a 5 and I have a 10 as a denominator. I could multiply that times 2 to get 10. I could do that. However, when I write 85, that's 85/100. So I don't know if I want to do that. Let's think about changing it into decimal form, okay? So if I change them into decimal form, 85/100 is good to go. But what about this 3/5? Well, 3/5 is 3 divided by 5. And remember, I want a decimal. So 3 divided by 5 is 0. Add a decimal is 0. 30 divided by 5 is 6. Voila. I have 6/10. I'm good to go. 7/10, when I read it, I know that is just place value, and it is 0.07. So now I have 4 decimals to order. And I'm going to put them in ascending order, which means least to greatest, because I'm increasing the amount. Okay? So, do I have any negatives or positives? No. So I don't need to make a T-chart. However, I have always taught my students that when we are comparing decimals, if you line them up, it is so much easier. So let's look over here, and I'm going to use 7/10 to line them up. I have 7/10. I'm going to write 85/100, 6/10, and 15/100. Now, when some students look at this, they're going to say, Miss Atkinson, 15/100 is greater than 6/10 because it has two numbers. However, that is not true. We can add place value zeros to make them have two digits. It does not change the value. That's still 7/10 because 7/10 is equivalent to 70/100. I'm going to add a place value 0 here, placeholder, and this is 6/10, which is equivalent to 60/100. They're just placeholders. Now when I look at it and I think in terms of money, can you tell me which one is the least amount? Hopefully you said 15 cents. Actually, it's 15/100 when you read it. So 15/100 is less than anything else we have listed. So again, I'm going to use my number line, and I'm going to put them in order. So I have 15/100. The second amount would be 6/10, 7/10, and then 85/100. And I want to write them in their original form, so I'm going to go back to 6/10 is 3/5, and 7/10 is 7/10. Did I forget something? Hopefully you said the inequality symbols, Miss Atkinson. Remember, this is least to greatest, so I know 15/100 is less than 3/5. 3/5 is less than 7/10, and 7/10 is less than 85/100. Okay? And if you have trouble with these inequality signs, one of the things that I like to do is that when you do a less than sign, you can actually write less in. L-E-S-S. A greater than sign, you can make a C and it kind of looks like a G for greater than. So that's just something, a side note, if you're having trouble with the inequality signs. All right. Go ahead and pause the video if you need to. Copy this down in your notes. And we're going to get started on 3, the example 3. Okay, so the next example is 1/2, 1 4/10, 1 1/4, which is a negative, -2, and 1 95/100. Okay, go ahead and write those down in your journal. And remember, we're going to use the same steps. So again, I don't think I want to turn them into fractions because I have that 1/4. So I don't want to turn them into percents. I could, but let's go ahead and stay with decimals, okay? Let's practice changing them into decimals. 1/2 is a decimal, a benchmark fraction. I have 1 1/4. I have negative 1/4. That's -1 25/100 because that's a benchmark fraction. I have -2, and then I have 1 95/100. Alright, so now we have some negatives, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to use our T-chart, and we're going to separate them. Negatives, positives. What I do is I always look for the negatives, and I circle them, and then I write them over here. This is -1.25. And remember, we line up decimals, so this is -2. Where is the decimal? Hopefully you said the decimal is behind the 2 because that, think of it as $2. If you put it in front of the 2, then it becomes